Hey, hey, welcome back to Boundaries Unleashed. And if you're new here, I'm so glad the algorithm, the different channels, your soul guides, your soul herself nudged you into this episode because it's going to be a good one. It's the kickoff of a new mini series that I'm excited to dive into with you guys. And if you've been rocking with me for a while now, then welcome back. And you're right on time, and I'm glad you're here. Now, this is, like I said, this is the first episode in our mini series, which I'm calling Becoming Her, the Boundaried Woman Awakens. So, we may have all been exposed to the idea of becoming, or just becoming, quote unquote, a new version of you, or just becoming the real version of you. Maybe that's been clouded in conditioning, clouded in trauma, clouded in just self-discovery. Like maybe you haven't really discovered who you truly are, and it's, about re-becoming yourself again. And this whole mini series that I want to dive into over the next couple episodes is really to help you tie back into that energy, to tie back into that higher energy of yourself. So becoming her, the boundaried woman awakens. And we're kicking it off with a bang. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 traits, and I believe every spiritually aligned boundaried woman is either developing them or she's already embodying them. So grab your tea, grab your tarot deck, grab your journal, and pop in those earbuds, and let me pour into you today. So right off the bat, I just want to say boundaries aren't just about saying no or managing your calendar. I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's not just about saying no. It's about identity. It's about your energy. It's about your spiritual alignment. And I know many people may not feel like boundaries are attached or related to your spiritual alignment, but they're so interconnected. It's crazy. At least that's my stance, because setting boundaries is a radical act of self-remembrance. It's remembering who you are, what you're about, and really embracing that. And boundaries just really set the stage for that boundaried woman to come forward. And it's really coming home to the woman you were before the guilt, before the pressure, and before the constant shape shifting has been introduced or been allowed to run your life. So it's really a coming home. Okay. So really embrace that and know that you don't have to earn your rest. You don't have to over explain your no, and you don't need permission to protect your peace. And in fact, boundary work is one of the most sacred things that you can do for yourself because it connects you to the truth of who you really are. And that's a beautiful thing, my friend. And the truth about it all, she's not here to be small. She's here to live as honestly and as big as possible. And, big is all relative, but really it's really leaning into the truth of who you are and your purpose here on this earth. So the first trait of a boundaried woman is energetic sovereignty. Now, what does that actually mean? So it means that she knows what's hers and what's not hers to carry. She no longer confuses over responsibility with love, right? You don't have to earn your love by overgiving. She can feel the tug of someone else's urgency and still own her own pace. Now, this is a big one that I see a lot of times as recovering people pleasers, and especially high empaths. We are very good at problem solving. And so people come to us to solve problems. And so it's very easy to be wrapped into someone else's urgency and timeline when a true energetically sovereign boundaried woman can feel someone's urgency but still move at her own pace. Now, this woman has learned how to filter out energy that doesn't belong to her, doesn't belong to her body, doesn't belong to her home, and doesn't belong to her inbox. Okay. Energetic sovereignty is about control and it's about clarity. You don't absorb every energy in the room. You don't internalize everyone's opinion. You protect your field because it's sacred, and it truly is. And you believe that. So I want to share just a personal story about my own energetic sovereignty discovery or empowerment, if you will. Now, I want to bring it back to a time. For those that don't know, I used to own a brick and mortar Pilates studio. And even before that, I was a Pilates instructor for other people. And I'd been a Pilates instructor for over a decade. And if any personal trainer out there, you can definitely relate to this. But if you're a personal trainer, whether it be just regular fitness, weight training, specialty training like mine, Pilates, you work when a lot of other people don't work. You work before people go to work, you work during lunch breaks, and you work after hours. So it's very easy to overwork in our field, and you are basically at the whim of other people's schedules, especially if you're trying to make it full time and you're trying to make a living and pay your bills. So, needless to say, when I was a Pilates instructor, I was working all day, every day, just to try to get 8 hours of paid client time, but it was typically over like a 14-hour period. And so, because of this kind of schedule, because of this industry norm, if you will, I really made myself available all the time. And so, my clients, in a way, kind of knew that. And actually, one of the reasons why they sought to work with me, for one, they knew that I was a subject matter expert and they know that I could help them. They knew I could get them out of pain and they really wanted to work with me. But they too had high demanding jobs. And so, one of the advantages of working with me is that I was so flexible with scheduling. Now, this sounds like a great idea for the client, but it wasn't so great for me because my life was at the whim of other people's schedules, my clients. And so even when they would change their appointments, even then they would cancel last second, or they wanted to pop in an extra session, it always felt like I had to arrive on their urgency because they needed me and I could be there. And I took on this responsibility like it was my own. And as you can imagine, it led to a lot of burnout. It led to a lot of internal resentment. And I just didn't need that drama in my life. And so what shifted is I finally understood that their urgency wasn't my urgency. And I could build my working hours that help suit me and still allow my clients to get the high level of service they were expecting and used to getting and deserve, but without disrespect my own boundaries and time. So I was able to serve them and serve myself equally. So the more clear I came about my time boundaries, or even when people could book or cancel or reschedule, the less no-shows I had, the less rescheduling I had, just period, the less cancels. And my schedule actually became a lot more consistent because people knew the expectation when they booked with me, right? They wanted the level of service and expertise. And what came with that is boundaries around my time. And in fact, my clients actually respected me more of it once I had those boundaries in place. So it is possible to be energetically sovereign and know that your time and your energy is just as important and valuable as the next person. And you don't have to sacrifice in order to live into those values. So, what are some tools for you to help reinforce this trait, this energetic sovereignty? A big one that helped me was cord cutting rituals. So this is very woo, but it's basically when it's like a kind of a guided meditation about literally cutting other people's energetic threads to you. If you feel ever energetically tied to someone, like their emotions have become your emotions or you become responsible, literally going through cord cutting meditations, ceremonies within yourself, within your own visual or guided through someone else, huge, really helped me separate my emotions from from another person's emotions. So I didn't feel responsible or tied or tethered to them. So that really helped. Working with tarot, that really helped, especially the suit of swords, which is very analytical, which is very about mental clarity and is actually about boundaries. So if you want to do some tarot work with the sword suit, really invoking your guides and whoever you spiritually align with and asking them to help clear your field so you can be at your highest energy, your highest vibration. And also just giving yourself some mantras. What's not mine, I lovingly return. Whatever you have to have on repeat or say out loud to yourself or say in your mind or write in your journal, just to reinforce the fact that what is not yours is okay and it's still beautiful. You just return it to whoever owns it. Okay. So these are some different ways you can help support this trait, this energetic sovereignty. Now, the second trait is she is spiritually aligned. Now, we hear a lot about alignment in the self help field, even in the spirituality field, but really it just means whatever is aligned, mean it is for you and for your highest good. That is very subjective to the person and their mission here on this earth and their goals in life. So, what's aligned for one person may not be aligned for another, but a very empowered woman knows what is aligned for herself and really to be spiritually aligned. So she doesn't have to believe in the divine, she just lives in connection with it. So, whatever you subscribe to, it's about living with it. Okay. So, her boundaries don't just come from strategy, they actually come from discernment. They are guided, they are intuitive, they are sacred. She's in touch with her inner knowing. She trusts the signs that come. She prays. She pulls tarot cards. She lights candles or sits in silence, and she receives clarity before she reacts. So it's that sacred pause in receiving before responding or taking action, and really sitting with it and allowing herself to receive those intuitive messages, nudges, wisdom. Okay. And here's the big shift here when it comes to being spiritually aligned. And it's really about knowing that our self worth is no longer defined by productivity. It's rooted in divinity, that sacredness. So it's not about how much output you can have, that is not tied to your self worth or your love, but just the fact that you exist, that you are living within your purpose and you are being. That's your divinity. That, my friend, is beauty. Now, another personal story about how I help embody this trait myself, especially my spiritual practice. It really helped me say no to things that just were no longer aligned, even when it was hard. And it was going back to my Pilates instructor days. I was working crazy hours. I was working before the sun came up, after the sun went down. I was working 7 days a week. I mean, it didn't matter. If I could book a client, I was working. But one of the biggest things that was really challenging, especially in my social life and even my family life, is that I worked every single Saturday. Now, this is not uncommon for certain industries to work the weekends, right? There are some industries that that's required to provide services. But for me, my family life was heavily impacted because the weekends were the only real time that I got to spend time with my family, my husband and my daughter, because during the week I was working all kinds of crazy hours, right? And so I didn't really get to see them, and the weekends were the only time. So the fact that I was working every Saturday meant less time with them. So my work and my clients were getting the best parts of me, and whatever's left at the end of the week is what my family was getting. And it wasn't a match. It wasn't even an energetic match from what I wanted and from what was actually being implemented in my life. And so I made the decision that I no longer wanted to work Saturdays. And it seems like an easy decision, right? Like, oh, easy, just stop working on Saturdays. You'll have more free time. But you have to remember, when you work in an industry that works on Saturdays, there are consequences to that, right? It meant that I was giving up extra money. I was giving up scheduling slots for clients that were already challenging for them to get into. I was giving up mentoring opportunities when I owned my own studio, because I had so many other instructors that was a huge opportunity for me to mentor them. I lost opportunity to interact with first-time clients. Often the first time they came into the studio was over the weekend when they were not working. And so by saying no to working Saturdays, I was actually saying no to a lot of other things that were actually beneficial to me. But it wasn't energetically aligned. It was not good for my soul. It was not spiritually aligned for me to work Saturdays anymore. And so I was able to understand that when I was able to have my own spiritual practices, particularly my tarot practice, particularly my meditation and my nature walks. It was during these times that I was able to listen in to what my body was saying, and not just my mind and not just my ego. And that's when I knew being on the schedule on Saturday was just no longer aligned. And so it was through my spiritual practices that gave me that clarity to implement the boundaries that were needed. So how can you cultivate this trait yourself, the spiritual alignment? And it's just what I just kind of explained in my own spiritual practice, is these daily intuitive check-ins. So especially the check-ins with your highest self. So however you get there, whether it be through tarot, whether it be through walking, meditation, prayer, checking in with your core values, whatever version of that aligns with you, but it's doing it daily because we interact with people and energy and ideas and spaces daily. And so we really want to make sure we stay in alignment. So it has to be a daily check-in to make sure that we don't get too far out of alignment and make it harder to get back into alignment. You can do tarot spreads. Like you can ask your tarot deck, where am I overextending? What truth am I ignoring? And let your cards speak to you. Let your spirit guides bring you the signs. Let your prayers be answered by asking these questions. Okay. You can journal. A lot of time that reflection will come through the pen, and those answers will come to you through that space of sitting with yourself and really anchoring into a practice. And it doesn't matter what the practice is, as long as it's meaningful for you, as long as it's a sacred practice. So it can be a movement practice, it can be a ritual bath, it can be a prayer, it can even be an astrology check-in, just anchoring into a practice so that you have a go-to method to make sure you're having those intuitive daily check-ins, to make sure that alignment is strong and is staying high. Because boundaries become sacred when they reflect our spiritual truth. And really what we're saying is it reflects your purpose, your true purpose, and not your people-pleasing programming. And that's really the key there. Now, the third and final trait that I want to talk to today about the boundaried woman is her emotional groundedness. Now, this is a trait that people pleasers often resist because it means letting people be uncomfortable, right? It opens the door for them to get mad at us. It opens the door for them to be disappointed. And as a recovering people pleaser, I can think of nothing worse than that. And I'm sure some of you can relate out there, right? And this boundaried woman, she's really comfortable being the bad guy in someone else's story. And for some of us, that's probably the hardest hurdle to overcome, but it is possible. And to be emotionally grounded is to be okay with being the bad guy in someone else's story. Because this boundaried woman knows it's not her job to regulate everyone else's emotions. She sees them, she respects them, and she understands that they're not hers to carry. So being emotionally grounded means you can hold your own discomfort without spiraling. You can allow someone else to be disappointed without collapsing or making it mean anything. You can feel your feelings without abandoning yourself or blaming someone else. And that's now, personally, this one was probably the hardest one next to being spiritually aligned for me is to get grounded, especially someone who is very energetically open. And I'm very much an outgoing person and I love to be around people. And I am connected to higher energies and frequencies and things like that. But getting grounded was probably one of my biggest challenges. And there's many ways that kind of came up into my life. But I want to share one particular emotionally hard boundary moment where someone got really upset with me and I didn't feel the need to rush in and fix it. And this is over many years when a close family member used to rely on me heavily for financial support. Now, this wasn't like an everyday thing, but it was frequent enough that I became like the extra bank account, if you will, right? And, they would call me last minute when all of a sudden things got really, really tricky for them. Like the bill was 3 months past due, padlocks were about to go on things were about to get taken away from them, housing was going to be an issue. I mean, think about like the 11th hour, I would get texts and phone calls from these family members or this particular family member in one particular, and you feel for them. I mean, it's your family, right? And so it was my family member. I didn't like to see them suffer. I didn't like them to know that they were sitting in this stress of figuring out how to get their bills paid and to get everything in their life sorted out. It was challenging. It was tricky. When they would call me and ask me for help, of course I wanted to help. Again, I didn't want them to be in that situation. And I had the means to help. I had, a padded bank account. I had a working job. I had a constant flow of income. So of course I was going to help. And I did many, many times. And I did for many, many years. Now, it wasn't until I finally realized I don't mind helping this family member, but this is no longer a one-off thing. Like this is becoming more routine. I can almost tell it on clockwork. And when you have those friends or family members where you might be this person and you see the phone and you're like, they never call me. Like, why are they calling me right now? Right? You know, they need something. And I mean, it was getting to that point where I was almost resenting any time they communicated with me because I knew they were going to ask for something. It was never a give moment. It was always an ask moment. I told myself that I no longer wanted to be this kind of crutch for them. I didn't want them, for one, I wanted them to know that they had the power and the means to figure it out themselves, that they had the power and means to change things in their life, to make this situation or these situations less stressful for them in the future. And I know they had the capacity and capability to it, but by utilizing me, they were never tapping into that. I made the decision that I was no longer going to be the 11th hour help. I was never going to be the direct emergency break glass. I didn't want to be the last resort person. I wanted to be the first resort person. And so I communicated the boundary to them and basically said, I want to help you. I know that this is very stressful for you. I know that these situations are recurring, and I know that you have the capacity and capability to remedy this. Like this doesn't have to be a pattern in your life. But by utilizing me in this way, it has become a pattern, and I'm no longer here for that. And so, where I would love to help you, I want to help you in a different way. And that's when these situations arise at the beginning. When things start to become a challenge, that's when I want you to call me so we can work things out together, so we can problem solve together before the stakes get too high. And if you call me at the last second and things become like kind of crazy, just know that the next time this happens, I'm not going to help you. And it was really tough to say that. It was really tough to say that to a close family member. It was really tough to hear them receive that information because of course they're crying, they're upset, they're like super, super, super stressed. And it was really, really hard. I remember the first time that I said that, like I got off the phone and like I was bawling, I was crying. How could I do this to a family member? But I had to think about it. It's like, what were they doing to me? I was making sure that I was working more hours to pad my savings account because I knew the call would come again. I was spending less time with my family because I had to work more to compensate for their expenses. I had to make myself available at all hours of the night or forego certain purchases or forego certain planning because I had to mentally and emotionally save aside savings for their emergencies that weren't mine, but became mine because I took ownership of that. And so when I really held that boundary, and consequences were had. At first, it was very, very challenging. At first, they were very upset, disappointed. But fast forward, it actually, that moment, that conversation we had and the boundary that I laid actually helped them break that cycle for themselves. And I knew that it was theoretical, but at the time I was still learning to be a boundaried person. And it really gave them the opportunity to stand in their own power and make better choices in the future because they knew that they had to. And they learned themselves. Vicky was right. I do have the capabilities. I am capable of making different choices and making different decisions and setting myself up for success in the future. So if I hadn't set that boundary, I would have been constantly suffering, and they would have constantly suffering by not really tapping into their highest self, to their aligned spiritual sovereignty, energetic sovereignty, and spiritual alignment as well. So know that stepping in and being emotionally grounded and respecting your own energy and also respecting other people's energy is very, very powerful. Okay. Because, the truth of it is, this kind of emotional regulation, this is like nervous system deep. This is some deep work for somatic practices. So, like breath work, even connecting with the earth element in ritual, like taking barefoot walks or going to the beach or forest bathing, all these things, or visualization. It's really, really important to ground ourselves, to allow ourselves to find the clarity through being grounded, because the truth of it is your emotions aren't problems to solve. They're signals to interpret. Okay? I want to say that again. Your emotions aren't problems to solve. They're signals to interpret. Emotions just are. They are very intense. They can be intense, but they are not a problem to solve. And in fact, when we're in our emotional brain, we actually can't think rationally anyway. And so it's like we almost can't have big feelings and think at the same time. We have to like process one and then shift and go into analytical mode, right? They are signals to help interpret. And so this is very powerful, especially in our self-reflective practices, because if we're having these big feelings, they are signals to interpret. What does this feeling mean? Ooh, when I'm in this feeling, it typically has a pattern of X, Y, and Z. So it's really when the more grounded we are, the better we are at interpreting these signals, these emotions that we're feeling. And when we're grounded, we can actually hear them and respond with integrity and in alignment and not be impulsive about it. And that's the beauty. How wonderful, right? So let's recap, my friends. The boundaried woman is energetically sovereign. She knows what's hers, what's not. She's spiritually aligned. She filters decisions through soul, not fear. And she's emotionally grounded. She holds herself through discomfort without abandoning her truth. This isn't a checklist. It's becoming. It's a spiritual awakening. It's a reclamation. It's owning who you are. It's becoming. And over the next few episodes, we're going to go deeper into this becoming. We're going to explore what it's like to shift out of guilt and martyrdom and exhaustion and really step into our spiritually aligned power. So if you're in your boundaried era, hit follow, subscribe, and share this with your mystic girlfriends and come back next week because the next episode is about why it feels so damn awkward to set boundaries when you've spent your whole life performing for approval, and trust that you're going to feel so seen. So until then, I want you to say a prayer, pull a card, trust your gut, and say no with love. And as always, love yourself like you mean it. Bye for now.